I'm grateful my mother told me I was a mistake. The champagne flute trembled slightly in my hand as I stared at my phone screen. 3 missed calls from Mom and a text that made my stomach clench. Asterisk, congratulations on the promotion, honey. I saw it in the newspaper. We should talk. I know things ended badly, but I'm your mother. I'm struggling right now and could really use your help. Please call me back. Love you. Asterisk. Love you. Right. I set down the Dom Perignon, $300 a bottle, because I could afford it now, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my downtown Seattle penthouse. The city sprawled below me like a circuit board, all gleaming lights and possibility. 15 years. That's how long it had been since I'd spoken to Linda Morrison, the woman who gave birth to me but forfeited the right to call herself my mother on a rainy Tuesday in October when I was 16. The memory hit me like it always did, sharp and sudden. I'd been sitting at our kitchen table in that cramped apartment in Spokane, struggling through calculus homework. She'd been drinking wine from the box again, still in her Walmart vest even though her shift had ended hours ago. Dad had been gone 3 months by then, and the divorce papers were scattered across the counter like fallen leaves. You know this is all your fault, she'd said, gesturing at the papers with her plastic cup. Her words were slightly slurred but perfectly clear. If I hadn't gotten pregnant with you, I could have finished college. Could have had a real career instead of scanning barcodes for minimum wage. You were a mistake, Sarah. An unwanted mistake who ruined my entire life. I remember looking up from my textbook, Advanced Calculus, because even then I was pushing myself harder than anyone expected, and feeling something crystallize inside my chest. Not heartbreak. Not the crushing devastation she probably intended. Something else entirely. Something cold and sharp and utterly focused. Got it, I'd said simply, then went back to solving equations. She'd expected tears. Maybe screaming. Perhaps the kind of dramatic breakdown that would let her feel justified in her cruelty would prove that I really was the burden she claimed I was. Instead, she got silence. I finished my homework, got a perfect score on the test the next day, and started planning my escape with a methodical precision that would later make me one of the most successful corporate lawyers on the West Coast. Now, my phone buzzed again. Another text, asterisk, I know you're reading these. The hospital called about payment arrangements. Please. Asterisk. Hospital. So it wasn't just the usual financial struggles. Something medical, then. I should have felt sympathy, or at least curiosity about what was wrong. Instead, I felt that same crystalline focus from 15 years ago, sharp and clean as a blade. My promotion celebration was scheduled for this Friday, 150 guests at the Four Seasons, including partners from 3 major firms, my entire legal team, and half the city's business elite. The Seattle Times had already confirmed they'd be there to cover my appointment as the youngest senior partner in Morrison, Wright & Associates history. Yes, Morrison, I kept her name, not out of sentimentality, but because I wanted it attached to my success. I wanted people to remember that a Morrison had made something of herself. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I was going to say in my acceptance speech. I poured myself another glass of champagne and began composing my response. Asterisk, thank you for reaching out. I'll be having a celebration at the Four Seasons this Friday at 7 p.m. for my promotion to senior partner. You're welcome to attend. We can discuss your situation then. Asterisk. I hit send before I could second guess myself, then immediately called my assistant. Bethany, it's Sarah. I need you to add one more name to the guest list for Friday. I gave her my mother's information, spelling out Linda Morrison slowly. Sent her the formal invitation with the address and dress code. Black tie required. Of course, Ms. Morrison. Should I arrange for a +1? No. She'll be coming alone. She'd been alone since Dad left, since her sister stopped taking her calls, since she burned every bridge with her bitterness and cheap wine. Just like I'd been alone when she decided to tell a 16-year-old that her existence was a mistake. After hanging up, I pulled out the acceptance speech I'd been working on for weeks. Standard corporate thank yous, gracious acknowledgments of mentors and colleagues, humble reflections on hard work and opportunity. I deleted it all and started fresh. My phone rang 20 minutes later. Sarah. Oh my God, Sarah, is this really you? Her voice was raspier than I remembered, worn thin around the edges. I can't believe you called me back. Well, texted, but still. Hello, Linda. I kept my voice professionally neutral, the same tone I used with opposing counsel. Linda. Honey, she caught herself. Thank you for the invitation. The Four Seasons. That sounds fancy. I'm not sure I have anything appropriate to wear. Nordstrom has a location downtown. They offer personal shopping services. I could hear her breathing on the other end, probably calculating the cost. Is there something specific you needed to discuss? Your text mentioned the hospital. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. It's my liver, Sarah. Cirrhosis. Stage 3. The doctor says I need to stop drinking and start treatment, but the insurance only covers part of it, and with my job situation. She trailed off. I felt nothing. No shock, no sympathy, no sudden rush of filial duty. Just that same crystalline clarity. I see. The treatment could cost $40,000. Maybe more. And I lost my job at Walmart last month, attendance issues. I know I don't have the right to ask, but you're doing so well, and I'm your mother, and... We'll discuss it Friday, I cut her off. The invitation includes dinner. I'll see you there. Sarah, wait. I hung up and immediately called my lawyer. Not the corporate attorney who handled my business deals, but Janet Reeves, the family law specialist I consulted when I was 25 and Linda had tried to contact me through Facebook. Janet, it's Sarah Morrison. I need to ask you about something hypothetical. If someone were to publicly thank a parent for being abusive, specifically for providing motivation through neglect and emotional cruelty, would that constitute defamation? Janet's laugh was sharp. Planning something interesting for your celebration? Potentially. Well, truth is an absolute defense against defamation. As long as you're stating facts about your own experience, you're protected. Though I'd be curious about your endgame here. My endgame. I looked out at the city again, at the lights that seemed to pulse with my heartbeat. Justice, I said simply. After we hung up, I returned to my speech. The words flowed like water now, each sentence perfectly crafted, each revelation timed for maximum impact. By midnight, I had 15 pages of the most brutally honest thank you speech ever written. Friday couldn't come fast enough. The next morning brought an unexpected complication. I was reviewing depositions in my office when Bethany knocked on my door, her usually composed expression troubled. Ms. Morrison. There's a woman here to see you. She says she's your aunt. Patricia Morrison. I nearly dropped my coffee. Aunt Patty, Dad's sister, whom I hadn't seen since his funeral 8 years ago. She tried to maintain contact after the divorce, but Linda had poisoned that well thoroughly, screening calls and intercepting birthday cards until Patty eventually gave up. Send her in. Patty looked older than her 53 years, her auburn hair now streaked with silver, but her green eyes, so like Dad's, were as sharp as ever. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a worn leather purse, and the sight of her made my chest tighten unexpectedly. Hello, Sarah. Her voice was cautious. You look successful. Patty. I stood, uncertain whether to offer a handshake or something more. She made the decision for me, crossing the room to pull me into a brief, fierce hug that smelled like lavender and memories. Your father would be so proud, she whispered, then stepped back, composing herself. I'm sorry to ambush you at work. Linda called me yesterday. Of course she had. I see. She told me about the liver disease. About your invitation to the party. Patty settled into the chair across from my desk. She also told me about your conversation, how cold you were. How you called her Linda instead of Mom. I returned to my seat, clasping my hands on the desk. She forfeited the right to that title 15 years ago. I know what she said to you, Sarah. About being a mistake. Patty's voice was quiet but steady. Your father told me before he died. He was eaten up with guilt about leaving you there with her. This was new information. Dad had known. He never said anything to me. He was ashamed. Said he was a coward for running, but he couldn't handle Linda's drinking, her constant anger. He wanted to fight for custody, but his lawyer said the courts favor mothers, and Linda threatened to make it ugly. To drag you through a public battle. Patty leaned forward. He sent money, though. For your college fund. $1,500 every month until he died. The room seemed to tilt slightly. What money? The money Linda was supposed to put toward your education. She told him she was saving it for you. Patty's expression grew grim. Based on how desperate she sounded yesterday, I'm guessing you never saw a penny of it. I did the math quickly. $1,500 a month for 8 years. $144,000. Money that could have paid for college without the brutal scholarship competition, without the 3 jobs I'd worked simultaneously, without the ramen noodles and secondhand textbooks and sleeping in my car between classes when I couldn't afford rent. She spent it, I said. It wasn't a question. I think so. On alcohol, probably. Maybe gambling, she always had a weakness for scratch-offs. Patty studied my face. You didn't know about any of this. No. The word came out sharper than I intended. Another betrayal to add to the pile. Another reason Linda Morrison deserved exactly what I had planned for Friday night. Sarah. Patty's voice was gentle. Whatever you're planning for this celebration, I hope you'll reconsider. Revenge has a way of poisoning the person seeking it more than the target. I smiled, and it felt cold as winter. I'm not seeking revenge, Patty. I'm seeking acknowledgement. Linda Morrison gave me the greatest gift of my life when she told me I was unwanted. She taught me that I could only depend on myself. That success was the only thing that mattered. She deserves recognition for that lesson. Patty was quiet for a long moment. And the money? What will you do about the treatment she needs? We'll discuss that Friday night. In front of everyone. Thursday afternoon, I was putting the finishing touches on my speech when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer. Sarah Morrison. Ms. Morrison. This is Dr. Angela Chen from Sacred Heart Medical Center. I'm calling about your mother, Linda Morrison. My grip tightened on the phone. What about her? She's listed you as her emergency contact. She was brought in about an hour ago, hepatic encephalopathy. It's a complication of her liver disease. She's stable now, but confused and disoriented. The toxins her liver can't process are affecting her brain function. I stared at the speech on my laptop screen, 15 pages of perfectly crafted truth that would destroy her in front of Seattle's legal elite. Will she be released by tomorrow evening? There was a pause. Tomorrow. Ms. Morrison, your mother is seriously ill. She needs immediate treatment and... Doctor, I have a very simple question. Will she be coherent and mobile enough to attend a function tomorrow night? Yes or no? I suppose if she responds well to treatment, she could be discharged tomorrow afternoon. But she really shouldn't be. Thank you for calling. I hung up and immediately dialed Bethany. I need you to arrange a car service for tomorrow evening. Pick up at Sacred Heart Medical Center at 6 p.m., deliver to the Four Seasons. Bill it to my personal account. Of course, Ms. Morrison. Should I include any special instructions for the driver? I considered this. Linda would be weak, possibly still confused, certainly unprepared for what was coming. Perfect. Tell them to wait 15 minutes if the passenger isn't ready. No longer. After hanging up, I returned to my speech, but concentration eluded me. The image of Linda in a hospital bed, alone and disoriented, kept intruding. Not out of sympathy, she'd made her choices, just like I'd made mine. But something about the timing felt almost too perfect, like the universe was offering me a gift-wrapped opportunity for maximum impact. My laptop chimed with an email from Marcus Webb, senior partner at Hartley & Associates and my biggest professional rival. We'd been circling each other for years, competing for the same high-profile cases, the same prestigious clients. Sarah, heard about your celebration tomorrow. Impressive achievement for someone so young. Looking forward to your speech. I'm sure you'll have some interesting stories to share about your journey to success. Best regards, Marcus. The tone was congratulatory on the surface, but I knew Marcus well enough to recognize the underlying threat. He'd been digging into my background, probably hoping to find something embarrassing to use against me later. The fact that he was mentioning my speech specifically suggested he knew something. I called Bethany back. I need you to run a background check on Marcus Webb. Everything, finances, personal life, professional complaints. Use Davidson Investigations and tell them I need it by tomorrow morning. Right away, Ms. Morrison. 2 hours later, Davidson sent over a comprehensive report that made me smile for the first time all day. Marcus's wife had filed for separation 3 weeks ago, citing his affair with a junior associate. The same junior associate whose sexual harassment complaint had been quietly settled by his firm for $60,000 last year. His professional reputation was hanging by a thread. I crafted a careful response, Marcus, thank you for the kind words. You're absolutely right about having interesting stories to share. I believe honesty is so important, don't you? Especially about the people who've shaped us. See you tomorrow night. By evening, I'd received confirmation that Linda would be discharged Friday at 4 p.m. Dr. Chin called personally to express her concerns about Linda attending a social event so soon after treatment, but I assured her that my mother was a strong woman who wouldn't want to miss celebrating her daughter's success. The irony wasn't lost on me. After 15 years of silence, Linda Morrison was finally going to see exactly what her unwanted mistake had accomplished. And everyone who mattered in Seattle's legal community would witness her moment of recognition. Justice, I'd told Janet, was my endgame. But as I practiced my speech one final time, I realized it was something more than that. It was completion. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp November clarity that made Seattle's skyline look like a postcard. I was reviewing the Davidson report over coffee when my phone rang at exactly 7:30 a.m. The caller ID showed Sacred Heart Medical Center. Ms. Morrison. This is Nurse Rebecca Martinez. I'm calling about your mother's discharge today. I set down my cup carefully. Is there a problem? Well, she's been asking to speak with you all morning. She seems anxious about tonight, keeps talking about needing to explain something to you before the party. Her blood work looks good, but her emotional state is. She paused. She's been crying, Ms. Morrison. 4 hours. I see. I walked to my window, watching early commuters stream across the plaza below. Will this affect her discharge time? No, she can still leave at 4 p.m. as scheduled. But I thought you should know, she asked me to tell you that she found some old papers in her things. Bank statements, she said. She wants to talk to you about money your father sent. My grip tightened on the phone. So Linda had finally realized I might discover the truth about Dad's payments. Probably planned to confess everything tonight, throw herself on my mercy in front of all those witnesses. Paint herself as the repentant mother seeking forgiveness. Thank you for letting me know, I said evenly. Please tell her we'll have plenty of time to talk tonight. After hanging up, I called the Four Seasons to confirm final arrangements. My event coordinator, Michelle Santos, sounded excited as she ran through the details. Everything's perfect, Ms. Morrison. Ballroom set for 160 guests, we had 10 more RSVPs yesterday. The Seattle Times photographer will arrive at 7:15, and I've arranged for the podium microphone to record your speech for the online broadcast. Online broadcast. I'd forgotten about that detail. How many viewers are we expecting? The legal community livestream typically gets 3,000 to 5,000 viewers. Your firm's been promoting it heavily on social media, first female senior partner under 30, very inspiring story. 3,000 to 5,000 people would witness Linda Morrison's public reckoning. The thought should have been satisfying, but instead I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Michelle, I may need to make some last-minute changes to the seating arrangement. My mother will be attending, she's been ill, so I want her seated close to the exit in case she needs to leave early. Of course. Would you like her at the family table near the front? No. The word came out sharper than intended. Table 12, by the service entrance. And Michelle? When I call for questions during my speech, don't let her approach the microphone without clearing it with me first. At noon, Bethany knocked on my office door with an expression I'd never seen before, something between concern and disapproval. Ms. Morrison. Your mother called the office. 3 times. She sounds desperate. She keeps saying she needs to warn you about something before tonight. Bethany hesitated. She also mentioned that she's been sober for 6 days. Since the hospital admission. 6 days sober. Probably the longest stretch Linda had managed in 20 years. Did she say what she wanted to warn me about? Something about Marcus Webb. She said he contacted her yesterday, asking questions about your childhood. Offered her money for information. Bethany's voice dropped. She said she didn't tell him anything, but she's worried he might have found other sources. The room suddenly felt smaller. Marcus had been busy. What kind of questions? About your father, apparently. About why you estranged from her. She seemed to think he was planning to use whatever he found against you tonight. I thought about Marcus's email, the calculated tone, the emphasis on interesting stories. He was planning his own little revelation, probably hoping to undermine my moment of triumph with some carefully timed character assassination. Bethany, I need you to call security at the Four Seasons. Add Marcus Webb to the watch list. If he approaches my mother at any point tonight, I want him removed immediately. Ms. Morrison. Bethany's voice was careful. May I ask what you're planning to say tonight? About your mother. I studied her face, loyal, efficient Bethany who'd worked for me for 3 years and never asked a personal question. Why? Because I grew up with an alcoholic parent too. And I know what it feels like to want revenge. She met my eyes steadily. I also know how it feels afterward. When the anger fades and you realize what you've destroyed can never be rebuilt. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, I turned back to my computer. That will be all, Bethany. She lingered for a moment, then quietly closed the door behind her. At 3 p.m., I received a text from an unknown number, *, this is Marcus. Looking forward to your speech tonight. I think the audience will find your family dynamics particularly fascinating. Especially the part about the college fund. Break a leg. *. He knew. Somehow, Marcus Webb had discovered Linda's theft of Dad's money. And he planned to use it, not to expose her, but to paint me as a vindictive daughter publicly humiliating a sick woman over financial issues. I looked at my speech, 15 pages of brutal honesty that would destroy Linda Morrison in front of 5,000 viewers. Then I thought about Marcus's smug face, his certainty that he could manipulate this situation to damage my reputation. For the first time since this began, I smiled with genuine pleasure. Marcus Webb had no idea what he'd just walked into. At 5 p.m., I was putting the final touches on my makeup when my phone rang. Dr. Chen's name flashed on the screen. Ms. Morrison, I'm calling about your mother's discharge. She's refusing to leave. I paused, mascara wand halfway to my lashes. What do you mean refusing? She's sitting on her bed, fully dressed, but she won't get up. She keeps saying she can't face tonight, that she's made a terrible mistake agreeing to come. She's asking if we can call you to postpone. Through my bedroom window, I could see the Four Seasons across the city, its ballroom probably bustling with final preparations. 160 guests. The Seattle Times photographer. Marcus Webb sharpening his knives. All waiting for a show I'd orchestrated with surgical precision. Put her on the phone. Sarah. Linda's voice was paper thin, fragile in a way I'd never heard before. Honey, I can't do this. I'm not strong enough to face all those people. To face you. Not after what I did with your father's money. Not after everything. I sat down on my bed, still in my robe, the black Armani gown I'd chosen hanging like a shadow on my closet door. The car will be there at 6 p.m., Linda. Be in it. Please, Sarah. Can't we just meet somewhere private? A coffee shop, or... No. My voice was ice. You want my help with your medical bills. You want forgiveness. You'll earn it. Tonight. In front of everyone. I hung up and immediately called the car service. This is Sarah Morrison. When you arrive at Sacred Heart at 6 p.m., if my mother isn't waiting outside, go into the building and get her. Room 314. Tell her I'll cover any additional charges if you have to wait. Ma'am, our drivers aren't authorized to. I'll pay you $500 extra. Cash. Just make sure she gets to the Four Seasons. At 5:30, as I was zipping up my gown, Bethany called. Ms. Morrison, we have a situation. Marcus Webb just arrived at the Four Seasons. He's requesting to speak with you privately before the event begins. He says it's urgent. I checked my reflection one final time. The dress was perfect, elegant but severe, the kind of outfit that commanded respect and suggested untouchable success. Tell him I'll see him during the cocktail hour. Not before. There's something else. I ran into Janet Reeves in the lobby. She mentioned that Marcus has been making calls to family court clerks, asking about sealed records from your parents' divorce proceedings. My blood chilled. The divorce records were supposed to be sealed, but clerks could be bought, especially if Marcus had offered enough money. Those files contained everything, Linda's drinking, the custody evaluations, possibly even Dad's statements about why he'd left me behind. How much does Marcus know? Janet wasn't sure, but she seemed worried. She said if Marcus has found a way to access those records, he might try to frame tonight as you taking advantage of your mother's illness for public revenge. I closed my eyes, thinking fast. Marcus's strategy was becoming clear. He planned to position himself as Linda's defender, the noble colleague protecting a sick woman from her vindictive daughter. It would play perfectly to the crowd's sympathies, especially if he could produce evidence that Linda was genuinely remorseful about the stolen money. Bethany, I need you to do something for me. Call Dr. Chen at Sacred Heart. Ask her to fax Linda's medical records to the hotel, specifically, the blood alcohol levels from when she was admitted Tuesday night. Route them to my room. The medical records. Sarah, what are you? Just do it. And Bethany? After tonight, regardless of how this goes, I want you to update your resume. You'll need a new job. What? Ms. Morrison, I don't understand. I hung up and grabbed my clutch, checking that it contained the USB drive with my speech. 15 pages that would destroy Linda Morrison. But Marcus Webb had forced my hand, turned this into a chess match instead of a simple execution. Fine. I'd been playing chess since I was 16 years old, sitting at that kitchen table while Linda called me a mistake. Tonight, everyone would finally understand exactly what kind of player that mistake had become. The car arrived at 6:45. Time to find out if Linda had gotten into that sedan, or if she'd chosen to face her liver disease alone rather than face what I'd planned for her. Either way, Marcus Webb was about to learn that some games have more than one winner. The Four Seasons ballroom was already half full when I arrived, the familiar hum of Seattle's legal elite mixing business with champagne. I spotted Marcus Webb immediately. He positioned himself near the entrance like a spider waiting for prey, his silver hair perfectly styled, his smile sharp enough to cut glass. Sarah. He intercepted me before I'd taken 3 steps. You look radiant. Success suits you. Marcus. I kept my voice pleasantly neutral. How thoughtful of you to arrive early. I trust you're looking forward to the evening's entertainment. His eyes glittered. Oh, immensely. Though I have to say, I'm particularly interested in meeting your family. Your mother should be arriving soon, shouldn't she? He checked his Rolex with theatrical precision. Assuming she's feeling well enough after her recent hospitalization. So he knew about Sacred Heart. Probably knew about the liver disease too. Linda's stronger than she appears. She wouldn't miss celebrating her daughter's success for anything. How touching. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. You know, Sarah, I've always admired your resilience. Rising above such a challenging childhood. Not everyone could have overcome having their college fund stolen by an alcoholic parent. Such a betrayal of trust. There it was. The confirmation that Marcus knew about Dad's money, probably every detail from the divorce records. He was testing my reaction, looking for the crack in my armor that would tell him exactly how to play this. I smiled. Family shapes us in such unexpected ways, doesn't it? I'm actually planning to address that very topic in my speech tonight. The importance of acknowledging the people who made us who we are. Something flickered across Marcus's face, confusion, then calculation. He'd expected anger or defensiveness, not calm agreement. Well, I'm sure it will be illuminating. Oh, I guarantee it. I touched his arm lightly. Save me a dance later, Marcus. After the speeches. I have a feeling you'll want to celebrate. I moved away before he could respond, making my way through the crowd toward the registration table. Bethany intercepted me halfway there, her face grim. The medical records arrived, she said quietly, pressing a manila envelope into my hands. Linda's blood alcohol was 0.24 when she was admitted Tuesday night. That's 3 times the legal limit. 3 times. Even for someone with Linda's tolerance, that level should have been lethal. She'd been actively trying to drink herself to death when the liver finally gave her an ultimatum. Any word from the car service? They called 20 minutes ago. She's in the car, but... Bethany hesitated. The driver said she's been crying the entire trip. And talking to herself. Something about being sorry and needing to tell the truth. I tucked the envelope into my clutch next to the USB drive. 2 versions of Tonight Now, the original plan, and whatever desperate confession Linda was preparing. Either way, she'd sealed her fate the moment she got into that sedan. Ms. Morrison. Michelle Santos appeared at my elbow, her event coordinator smile strained. We have a small situation. Channel 7 News just arrived with a camera crew. They're saying Marcus Webb called them about a compelling human interest angle to your story. Should I let them in? The words were out before I'd fully processed them. A live news crew meant this would go beyond the legal community live stream. Local television. Probably picked up by other stations if the story was interesting enough. Seat them at table 15, good angle on the podium. Bethany stared at me. Sarah, what are you doing? What I'd been doing for 15 years, playing to win. Marcus thought he was orchestrating Linda's public vindication, turning me into the villain of a heartwarming redemption story. But he'd forgotten the first rule of courtroom warfare, never ask a question you don't already know the answer to. At 7:10, I saw them through the ballroom windows. Linda Morrison stepping out of a black sedan, wearing what looked like a borrowed dress, navy blue, too large for her diminished frame. She moved carefully, like someone navigating the world through a haze of medication and fear. She was 54 but looked 70, her face gaunt and yellowed from liver failure. The woman who'd called me a mistake now looked like she was dissolving, becoming insubstantial. Marcus was at her side within seconds, playing the solicitous family friend, guiding her toward table 12. I watched him lean down to whisper something in her ear, saw her nod and clutch his arm like a lifeline. The photographer from the Seattle Times chose that moment to take their picture, Marcus Webb, respected senior partner, comforting the estranged mother of tonight's honoree. The optics were perfect. Exactly what he'd planned. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, asterisk, your mother wants you to know she brought something to show you. Papers from your father. She says it will change everything. Asterisk. Papers from Dad. Not just the bank statements Patty had mentioned, but something else. Something Marcus thought would derail my entire evening. I looked across the ballroom at Linda, hunched in her chair like a broken bird, and felt that familiar crystalline focus settle over me. Whatever she'd brought, whatever tearful confession Marcus had coached her through, it was too late. The truth was going to come out tonight. All of it. Just not the truth Marcus Webb was expecting. At 7:25, I made my way to the podium for the opening remarks, every eye in the ballroom tracking my movement. The crowd had swelled to capacity, lawyers, judges, business leaders, and now a television camera that would broadcast this moment across Seattle. I could see Linda at table 12, her hands trembling as she clutched a manila folder to her chest like armor. Marcus sat beside her, his expression one of concerned protectiveness, occasionally patting her shoulder in a show of support that made my jaw clench. Good evening, everyone. My voice carried clearly through the sound system. Thank you for joining me to celebrate not just a personal milestone, but a testament to the power of determination over circumstance. Polite applause rippled through the room. I spotted Janet Reeves near the front, her expression worried. Dr. Chen had somehow appeared at table 8, probably Linda's idea, moral support for whatever revelation she was planning. Tonight, I want to share something personal with all of you. A story about gratitude. I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the audience until it landed on Marcus. Gratitude for the people who shape us, especially those who teach us our most valuable lessons through their own choices. Marcus's confident smile flickered slightly. This wasn't the direction he'd anticipated. 15 years ago, I learned the most important lesson of my life from someone very close to me. I learned that some people will try to convince you that you're a burden, a mistake, something that ruined their dreams. My voice remained steady, professional. Tonight, I want to publicly thank that person for giving me the clarity to prove them wrong. A murmur ran through the crowd. Several people glanced toward Linda's table, where she had gone completely still. But before I continue, I said, reaching into my clutch, I think we should address some information that's come to light recently. Information about trust, betrayal, and the true cost of addiction. I pulled out the medical records, holding them up for the camera to capture. These are blood alcohol results from Sacred Heart Medical Center, dated this past Tuesday. They show that someone very important to me nearly drank herself to death, maintaining a blood alcohol level of 0.24 while her liver was actively failing. The room was dead silent now. Marcus had gone pale, clearly recognizing that his carefully orchestrated narrative was slipping away from him. For those who aren't familiar with alcohol poisoning, 0.24 is well into the potentially fatal range. For someone with advanced liver disease, it represents a deliberate attempt to accelerate their own death rather than face the consequences of their choices. Linda made a small, wounded sound that the microphone didn't catch, but I saw her fold in on herself. I bring this up not for sympathy, but for context. Because I've recently learned that this same person systematically stole $144,000 from me over 8 years, money my deceased father sent for my education, money that could have changed the entire trajectory of my young adult life. The Channel 7 camera zoomed in on my face. This was exactly the kind of dramatic revelation that would make the late-night news cycle. Now, some of you might expect me to be angry about this theft. To feel betrayed or victimized. I smiled, and it felt genuinely warm for the first time all evening. But I'm not. I'm grateful. Because that theft forced me to become self-reliant in ways I never could have imagined. It taught me that success earned through my own effort was infinitely more valuable than any inheritance. Marcus was frantically whispering something to Linda, probably trying to salvage his plan, but she wasn't responding. She sat frozen, staring at me with an expression of absolute devastation. Which brings me to tonight's real purpose, I continued, my voice gaining strength. I want to extend a public invitation to the person who taught me these lessons. Linda Morrison, my mother, please join me on stage. The spotlight swiveled to table 12, illuminating Linda's tear-streaked face as 300 people turned to stare at her. The television camera followed, broadcasting her moment of exposure to thousands of viewers. She didn't move. Please, I said into the microphone, my tone gentle but implacable. It's time. Linda remained frozen in her chair, the spotlight harsh against her sallow skin. The silence stretched until it became unbearable, broken only by the software of the Channel 7 camera capturing every second of her paralysis. Mom, I said again, and the word felt foreign on my tongue after 15 years. Everyone's waiting. Marcus Webb stood abruptly, his hand on Linda's shoulder. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we should remember that Mrs. Morrison is recovering from a serious medical. Mr. Webb. My voice cut through his interruption like a blade. I don't recall inviting commentary from the audience. Please sit down. The authority in my tone, honed through years of courtroom dominance, had its intended effect. Marcus hesitated, caught between his desire to control the narrative and the social impossibility of disrupting someone else's celebration. He sat, but his jaw was tight with barely contained fury. Linda finally moved, her hands shaking as she placed the manila folder on the table. She stood slowly, Dr. Chen half rising as if to steady her, then began the long walk to the front of the ballroom. Each step seemed to cost her enormous effort, and I could hear her labored breathing through the wireless microphone clipped to her borrowed dress. When she finally reached the podium, she looked even smaller next to me, fragile and yellowed, her eyes rimmed with the kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting a losing battle against your own body. Up close, I could smell the medicinal soap from the hospital, the faint chemical scent of whatever drugs were keeping her liver functional. Hello, everyone, she whispered, then cleared her throat and tried again. Hello. I'm Linda Morrison. Louder, please, I said, adjusting the microphone closer to her mouth. We want everyone to hear you. She flinched at the feedback squeal, then nodded. I'm Sarah's mother. And she's right about everything she said. About the money, about my drinking. About all of it. A murmur rippled through the audience. This wasn't the defiant confrontation they'd expected, nor the tearful reconciliation Marcus had probably promised them. Linda's complete capitulation was somehow more uncomfortable than either alternative would have been. Tell them about the college fund, I prompted gently. About Dad's $1,500 every month. I spent it. Her voice cracked. Every penny. David, Sarah's father, he sent that money faithfully for 8 years, and I told him I was saving it for her education. But I spent it on alcohol and lottery tickets and... She covered her face with her hands. She worked 3 jobs to pay for college. She lived in her car sometimes because I spent the money that was supposed to help her. The Channel 7 reporter was scribbling frantically. This was better than anything Marcus could have orchestrated, a complete confession, delivered with devastating sincerity to a captive audience of Seattle's legal elite. And the night you told me I was a mistake. I kept my voice conversational, almost friendly. You remember that conversation, don't you? Linda's shoulders shook. October 15, 2008. You were doing homework at the kitchen table. Calculus. I'd been drinking since I got home from work, and I was so angry about the divorce, about David leaving, about how hard everything was. She looked directly into the television camera. I told my 16-year-old daughter that she was an unwanted mistake who ruined my life. Someone in the audience gasped audibly. I saw Dr. Chen put her hand over her mouth in horror. But here's what I want everyone to understand, Linda continued, her voice gaining unexpected strength. Sarah looked at me that night and didn't cry. Didn't scream. She just said, got it, and went back to her homework. And I knew in that moment that I'd lost her forever. That she was going to leave me behind and never look back. And I was right. The ballroom was absolutely silent now, transfixed by this raw display of maternal failure broadcast live across Seattle. I deserve everything that's happening tonight, Linda whispered. And Sarah deserves so much better than the mother I was. The silence that followed Linda's confession was deafening. I watched 300 of Seattle's most powerful people process what they just witnessed, not the vindictive daughter humiliating her sick mother that Marcus had probably promised them, but something far more complex and uncomfortable. Then Linda reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, her hands trembling so violently she nearly dropped it. There's something else, she said into the microphone. Something I need to give you before it's too late. She unfolded the paper with agonizing slowness. Even from where I stood, I could see it was handwritten in Dad's careful script, the same neat penmanship I remembered from birthday cards and homework help sessions before everything fell apart. Your father wrote this letter the week before he died, Linda whispered. It was in his safety deposit box. His lawyer gave it to me 8 years ago, but I was too ashamed to. She swallowed hard. I was supposed to give this to you when you graduated law school. But I was drunk at your graduation. Too drunk to even find you in the crowd. The paper rustled as she handed it to me. I recognized Dad's handwriting immediately. For Sarah, when she becomes the lawyer I always knew she would be. My hands were steady as I unfolded it, but something cold was spreading through my chest. Dad had known I'd become a lawyer. He died when I was 20, still struggling through undergrad with those 3 jobs and ramen dinners. How could he have been so certain? The letter was dated March 15, 2015, 2 weeks before his heart attack. Asterisk, Sarah, if you're reading this, Linda finally found the courage to do what she should have done years ago. I hope you can forgive an old man's cowardice. I hope you can forgive us both, asterisk. Asterisk, I know about the college money. I've known for 3 years that Linda spent every dollar instead of saving it. My lawyer, Jim Patterson, showed me the bank records when I updated my will. I should have confronted her. Should have fought for custody when you were younger. Should have been the father you deserved instead of the coward who ran away, asterisk. Asterisk, but Sarah, I need you to understand something that Linda doesn't know, something I never had the courage to tell either of you. I didn't leave because of her drinking. I didn't leave because the marriage was hard, asterisk. Asterisk, I left because I was embezzling money from my construction company to cover Linda's gambling debts. She doesn't know about the gambling, thinks she hid it from me. But I knew about the scratch-offs, the casino trips, the $30,000 she'd run up in credit card advances. I stole $85,000 over 2 years trying to keep us afloat, asterisk. Asterisk, my business partner found out 3 days before I left. He agreed not to press charges if I disappeared and never came back to Seattle. So I ran, and I let Linda think it was her fault. I let you think I abandoned you because of her drinking, asterisk. Asterisk, the monthly payments I sent weren't guilt money, sweetheart. They were stolen money. Every dollar came from what I'd taken from Peterson Construction. I thought I was helping, but I was just passing on my theft to you, asterisk. Asterisk, you've accomplished everything through your own strength, your own brilliance, your own refusal to let circumstances define you. The lawyer reading this letter became successful despite having 2 criminals for parents, not because of anything we did right, asterisk. Asterisk, I'm proud of you, Sarah. Prouder than I have any right to be, asterisk. Asterisk, all my love. Dad, asterisk. Asterisk P.S. The safety deposit box contains the evidence of my embezzlement. If you ever want to understand why I really left, Jim Patterson has the key. Asterisk. The letter slipped from my numb fingers, floating to the podium like a white flag of surrender. The microphone caught Linda's sharp intake of breath as she realized I'd finished reading, but I couldn't look at her. Couldn't look at anyone. Embezzlement. Dad hadn't been the noble father sending support from afar, he'd been a thief, just like Linda. The monthly payments I'd never received weren't stolen from me twice, they were stolen goods from the beginning. Every dollar tainted. Sarah. Linda's voice seemed to come from very far away. Honey, what does it say? I looked out at the audience, at Marcus Webb's confusion, at the Channel 7 cameras still rolling, at 300 people waiting for my response to this public family therapy session I'd orchestrated. Dr. Chen was standing now, her medical instincts probably screaming that Linda needed to be back in a hospital bed, not on stage having her failures broadcast across Seattle. Janet Reeves looked horrified. Bethany was pressed against the back wall, her hand over her mouth. And in the front row, I spotted a face I hadn't expected, Jim Patterson, Dad's lawyer, looking ancient and guilt-ridden. He'd probably been carrying this secret for 8 years, watching me build my career while knowing the foundation was built on lies within lies. I picked up the letter, folding it carefully along the creases Dad had made. When I spoke, my voice was perfectly steady. Thank you, Linda. This changes everything. The silence in the ballroom stretched like a taut wire as I stood there holding Dad's letter, watching 300 faces wait for my next move. Linda swayed slightly beside me, whether from medication or the weight of finally unburdening herself, I couldn't tell. This changes everything, I repeated, louder this time, and saw Marcus Webb lean forward in anticipation. He probably thought this was his moment, that whatever revelation the letter contained would somehow vindicate Linda and cast me as the villain he'd been hoping for. I looked directly into the Channel 7 camera. What this letter reveals is that I've been operating under false assumptions for 15 years. I thought I had one parent who abandoned me and one who betrayed me. But it turns out I had 2 parents who were both thieves. The murmur that rippled through the crowd was different now, uncomfortable, like people suddenly realizing they were witnessing something too private for public consumption. But they couldn't look away. None of them could. My father wasn't sending support money, as I believed until 20 minutes ago. He was laundering his own embezzlement through monthly payments to a woman who was spending every dollar on alcohol and gambling. I folded the letter and slipped it into my clutch next to the medical records. $85,000 stolen from Peterson Construction, filtered through my mother's addictions, never reaching the daughter it was supposedly intended for. Linda made us sound like a wounded animal. Sarah, I didn't know about David's. Of course you didn't. My voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse than anger would have been. You were too busy hiding your own crimes to notice his. The gambling, Linda. Tell them about the gambling. Her face went absolutely white. How do you? 30,000 in casino debts. Credit card advances. Dad knew everything. I turned back to the audience, my tone remaining conversational despite the devastation I was laying out like evidence in a court case. What we have here is a perfect case study in how dysfunction perpetuates itself. 2 people drowning in their own poor choices, each believing they were protecting the family from the other's secrets. Dr. Chen was moving toward the stage now, clearly concerned about Linda's physical state. But Linda held up a shaking hand to stop her. Wait, Linda whispered into the microphone. There's more. More. Of course there was more. I watched her reach into the manila folder she carried from table 12, her movement slow and deliberate like someone handling explosives. The divorce settlement, she said, pulling out a thick legal document. David didn't just leave, Sarah. He was served papers. I filed for divorce first, and I used information about his business troubles to get a larger settlement than I deserved. The document crackled as she unfolded it. I got the house, half his retirement, and spousal support for 10 years. I knew he was struggling financially, knew he might be doing something questionable to pay the bills, and I used that knowledge to threaten him during negotiations. Marcus Webb's confident expression had completely evaporated. This wasn't the sympathetic maternal figure he'd counted on, this was a woman systematically destroying any remaining illusion that she'd been a victim of circumstances rather than an active participant in creating them. I blackmailed your father into giving me everything, then spent the next 15 years telling myself I was the abandoned wife. Linda's voice was gaining strength, as if confession was a drug and she'd finally found her preferred dosage. But I wasn't abandoned, Sarah. I was complicit. In everything. The Channel 7 reporter looked like Christmas had come early. This was the kind of messy family drama that would lead the 11 o'clock news and probably get picked up nationally. Seattle's youngest senior partner publicly confronting her criminal parents in front of the city's legal elite, it was pure ratings gold. But something was shifting in the room's energy. What had started as uncomfortable voyeurism was becoming something else. I could see it in the faces around me, not just fascination with the drama, but a growing recognition of something that made them deeply uneasy. They were watching a daughter methodically dissect her parents' failures with surgical precision, and it was starting to look less like justice and more like something else entirely. Something that might reflect poorly on the person wielding the scalpel. I felt the shift in the room like a change in barometric pressure. The fascination was cooling into something else, discomfort, maybe even disgust. These people had come to celebrate my success, not witness a public vivisection of family dysfunction. But Linda wasn't finished. She pulled out another document from her folder, this one yellowed with age. "There's one more thing," she said, her voice barely audible. "About why I really called you a mistake that night." My stomach clenched. "Linda, I think we've shared enough family history for." "No." For the first time all evening, she looked directly at me with something approaching her old defiance. "They need to know. You need to know." She held up what looked like a medical form. "This is from Planned Parenthood, dated March 1994. I was 18 weeks pregnant when I found out about your father's gambling problem, not the casino debts, his first gambling problem. Sports betting. He'd lost our entire wedding fund, $8,000 we'd saved for 2 years. The ballroom had gone dead silent. Even the wait staff had stopped moving. I made an appointment," Linda continued, her voice steady now. 18 weeks. Right at the cutoff. I was going to terminate the pregnancy because I couldn't imagine bringing a child into that mess. I felt the blood drain from my face. Behind me, I heard someone's sharp intake of breath. But I chickened out. Sat in that parking lot for 3 hours and couldn't go through with it. Drove home, threw the paperwork in a shoebox, and never told David I'd even considered it. Linda looked out at the audience, then back at me. "When I called you a mistake that night, Sarah, I wasn't just being cruel. I was remembering that afternoon in the parking lot, remembering how close I came to." She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Marcus Webb was staring at Linda with something approaching horror. This was so far beyond his planned narrative that he looked genuinely lost. The sympathetic mother defending herself against her successful daughter had become something much more complex and disturbing. "Why are you telling them this?" I whispered, leaning away from the microphone. "Because," Linda said, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system, "I spent 15 years thinking you hated me for calling you a mistake. But watching you tonight, seeing how you've orchestrated all this." She gestured at the cameras, the audience, the elaborate public humiliation. "I realized you don't hate me, Sarah. You've become me." The words hit like a physical blow. "That's not." "Look around," Linda interrupted. "You've brought me here, sick and broken, to confess my failures in front of everyone who matters to you. You've turned my liver disease into entertainment for these people. You've made sure the cameras are rolling so thousands of strangers can watch me fall apart." Her voice was gaining strength with each word. "This isn't justice, honey. This is revenge. The same petty, vindictive revenge I used on your father during the divorce." I stared at her, this woman I'd spent 15 years viewing as nothing more than an obstacle to overcome, and saw something I'd never noticed before. The way she stood despite obvious pain. The careful precision with which she'd planned tonight's confessions. The strategic timing of each revelation. Linda Morrison was playing chess too. She always had been. "The difference is," she continued, "I destroyed our family in private. You're doing it on live television." The words hung between us like a death sentence. Linda's accusation, that I'd become her, reverberated through the silent ballroom as I stood frozen at the podium, feeling 300 pairs of eyes dissecting every micro-expression on my face. "That's enough," I said quietly, reaching for the microphone to end this nightmare. But Linda stepped closer to the mic, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "You want to know what your father wrote in another letter? One he never finished." She pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from the very bottom of her folder. "I found it in his desk after he died. He was writing to you, Sarah. About visiting you at Harvard." My hand froze inches from the microphone. Dad had never visited me at Harvard. I'd assumed he didn't care enough to make the trip. "He drove to Boston twice," Linda continued, her voice growing stronger as mine grew weaker. "Twice. Sat in his rental car outside your dormitory for hours, watching you walk to classes. Too ashamed to actually approach you because he knew about the money I'd stolen. Knew you were working yourself to exhaustion because of our failures." The incomplete letter trembled in her hands. "Dear Sarah," she read, "I saw you today carrying 4 textbooks and wearing that same winter coat from 3 years ago. You looked so thin, so tired. I wanted to run to you, to explain everything, to give you the money for a proper meal and a warm coat. But I sat in that car like the coward I've always been, knowing I had no right to your forgiveness. Knowing that your strength comes from surviving us, not from anything we ever gave you." Dr. Chen was climbing onto the stage now, clearly concerned about Linda's trembling, but Linda waved her away with surprising force. "He never sent that letter because he realized something I'm just understanding tonight. We broke you, Sarah. But you took that brokenness and forged it into something harder than steel. Sharper too." Linda's eyes met mine, and for the first time in 15 years, I saw complete clarity there. "The question is, what are you planning to do with all that sharpness?" Marcus Webb chose that moment to stand up, his political instincts finally kicking in. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think Mrs. Morrison needs medical attention. Perhaps we should." "Sit down, Marcus." My voice cut through his intervention like a blade, carrying 15 years of courtroom authority. "Nobody asked for your commentary." But the spell was broken. People were shifting in their seats, checking their phones, whispering among themselves. The Channel 7 reporter was packing up his equipment with the satisfied efficiency of someone who'd gotten more than enough footage. I looked out at the faces in the crowd and saw something that chilled me more than Linda's accusations. Pity. Not for Linda, for me. They were looking at me like I was the damaged one, the person who turned success into a weapon and family dysfunction into public spectacle. Sarah, Linda whispered, stepping closer. I need to tell you one more thing. About tonight. About why I really came. I wanted to stop her, to end this before she could inflict any more damage on what remained of my carefully constructed life. But something in her voice, a note of desperate urgency, made me hesitate. I didn't come here for your forgiveness, she said, her words carrying clearly through the microphone. I came to warn you. Marcus Webb didn't just contact me yesterday. He's been calling me for 3 months, asking questions about your childhood, about the divorce, about your father. Offering me money for information. My blood turned to ice. What kind of information? Linda's eyes found Marcus in the crowd, and her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. The kind that would destroy your career if it came out wrong. But I never told him the most important thing, Sarah. The thing that would have given him exactly what he wanted. The ballroom held its collective breath as Linda's words hung in the air like a sword over Marcus Webb's head. I watched his face cycle through confusion, calculation, and then a dawning horror as he realized his carefully orchestrated plan was about to detonate in his face. What didn't you tell him? I asked, though part of me already knew this was going to be worse than anything we'd already revealed. Linda's smile was almost serene now, the expression of someone who'd finally decided to burn down everything rather than let others control the narrative. I didn't tell him about Peterson Construction. About how your father's business partner, William Peterson, has been looking for David's accomplices for 8 years. My mouth went dry. Accomplices? The embezzlement wasn't a solo operation, honey. David had help, someone feeding him information about which accounts to target, when large deposits were coming in, how to manipulate the bookkeeping software. Linda's voice was steady as a surgeon's scalpel. Someone who worked in their accounting department. Someone who received 20% of everything David stole. The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. You. $17,000 over 2 years. I was the inside contact who made David's theft possible. Linda looked directly at Marcus, whose face had gone ashen. And 3 months ago, when Mr. Webb started offering me money for information about our family, I did some research on him. Discovered his connection to Peterson Construction through his corporate law practice. Marcus Webb shot to his feet like he'd been electrocuted. This is completely inappropriate. William Peterson hired Marcus's firm in 2018 to pursue civil recovery of the stolen funds, Linda continued, ignoring his interruption. Marcus has been trying to locate David's accomplice for 3 years. When he saw Sarah's promotion announcement in the Seattle Times and recognized the Morrison name, he thought he'd found a way to get information about the embezzlement through family pressure. The room erupted in whispers as the implications sank in. Marcus hadn't been trying to humiliate me out of professional rivalry, he'd been conducting an investigation, using my own family dysfunction as leverage to solve a decade-old crime. Mrs. Morrison, you need to stop talking immediately, Marcus said, his voice tight with panic. Anything you're saying could be used against you in civil proceedings. I'm dying, Marcus. Linda's voice cut through his legal warnings with brutal simplicity. Stage 3 cirrhosis, remember? I've got maybe 6 months if I stop drinking completely, which we all know isn't going to happen. What exactly are you going to do to me that's worse than what I've already done to myself? Dr. Chen was trying to get Linda's attention, clearly alarmed by this public confession of criminal activity. But Linda was on a roll now, 15 years of suppressed truth pouring out like water through a broken dam. But here's the beautiful part, she continued, her eyes bright with something that looked almost like joy. Sarah had nothing to do with the embezzlement. She was 16 when it happened, working at McDonald's for minimum wage, completely innocent of her parents' crimes. Marcus has spent 3 months manipulating a family tragedy to investigate someone who was never involved in the first place. I looked at Marcus Webb, respected senior partner, my professional rival, the man who'd orchestrated this entire evening, and saw his career crashing down in real time. Using family relationships to conduct unauthorized investigations, manipulating witnesses, attempting to coerce confessions in civil matters, any one of these would be grounds for bar discipline. All of them together would end his legal career permanently. The irony, Linda said, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence, is that you both got exactly what you deserved tonight. Sarah got her public vindication, and Marcus got his confession. Just not the way either of you planned it. The silence that followed Linda's revelation stretched like a taut wire until I thought it might snap and take the entire room with it. Marcus Webb stood frozen beside table 12, his political instincts warring with his legal training while 300 witnesses watched his career implode in real time. But something extraordinary was happening inside me. The crystalline focus I'd carried for 15 years, that sharp, cold certainty that had driven every decision since that October night, was shifting into something else entirely. I looked at Linda, swaying slightly at the podium despite Dr. Chen's worried hovering, and saw her clearly for perhaps the first time. Not the villain of my origin story. Not the obstacle I'd spent my career overcoming. Just a broken woman who'd made terrible choices and was now facing the consequences with more courage than I'd ever given her credit for. Thank you, I said into the microphone, my voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. Linda blinked in surprise. For what? For telling me I was a mistake. I reached for her hand, yellowed and trembling, but warm. Real. You were right. I was a mistake in your life. Dad's gambling, your drinking, the embezzlement, the divorce, none of that would have happened if I hadn't existed. Your life would have been completely different. The Channel 7 reporter had stopped packing his equipment, sensing that the story wasn't over. But Linda, I continued, squeezing her fingers gently, do you know what the best part about being a mistake is? Mistakes don't owe anyone anything. Mistakes get to choose who they become. I turned to address the full ballroom, Linda's hand still clasped in mine. I spent 15 years building a life designed to prove my mother wrong. Every scholarship, every perfect grade, every professional victory, all of it was motivated by those words she spoke when I was 16. You're an unwanted mistake who ruined my life. Marcus Webb had finally found his voice. Sarah, as your colleague, I strongly advise you to Marcus, shut up. The words came out with such casual authority that he actually stepped backward. You lost the right to give me advice the moment you started manipulating my dying mother for your embezzlement investigation. I looked back at Linda, whose eyes were bright with unshed tears. But tonight, I finally understand what you gave me. You gave me complete freedom. Freedom from obligation, from guilt, from the need to fix anyone else's problems. You gave me permission to live entirely for myself. Linda's voice was barely a whisper. Sarah. And now I'm giving you something in return. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone, quickly accessing my banking app. The liver treatment Dr. Chen recommended, $60,000 for the complete program at Johns Hopkins. I'm transferring the money right now. Dar. Chen gasped audibly. Linda went completely still. Not because I forgive you, I clarified, my thumbs moving across the phone screen. Not because we're reconciled or because this changes anything between us. But because I'm grateful. Because you were the first person who ever told me the truth about my place in the world, and that truth made me unstoppable. The transfer confirmation appeared on my screen. $60,000, less than I spent on my car, a fraction of my signing bonus, but enough to give Linda Morrison a chance at 6 more months of life. There, I said, showing her the confirmation number. Consider it payment for services rendered. The best motivational speech I ever received, delivered when I was 16 years old by someone brave enough to tell me exactly who I wasn't going to become. I turned to the crowd one final time, Linda's hand still warm in mine, and smiled with genuine joy for the first time in 15 years. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm grateful my mother told me I was a mistake. Because that mistake became everything she never could be.